Okay, for this project we're going to take a still image, prepare it in Photoshop, and take it in After Effects and do some simple animation called parallax view that will add some interesting animation and some slow motion action to our still image. So we'll bring some three-dimensional life into our still image. First thing I did was I prepared my image in Photoshop. I found an image of a lion. I cut it out with the pen tool in Photoshop. Found an image of an eagle, cut that out with the pen tool in Photoshop, and then put them on this background. I found this background of this grasslands, and we're going to have an eagle versus tiger battle. I don't know, maybe it happens, maybe it could happen, who knows. Alright, so I have them all generally where they're going to be, where they're going to begin in my After Effects animation. And I labeled the different layers so it'll be easier to find once I bring these layers into After Effects. Background, tiger, eagle. I did any effects I needed to in Photoshop, brightness, contrast, hue, saturation, any of those type of things I can do in Photoshop ahead of time. And I sized these roughly to where they'll be used in After Effects, about the same size. I did a width of 1440 and height of 1080 and at 72 pixels per inch resolution. Alright, so this is ready to go. I saved this and I put all my elements I will use, any images or anything else, into a folder. It's best to keep things organized. So I prepared that in Photoshop. Now I'm ready to begin in After Effects. So I open Adobe After Effects, and it automatically gives you a new project. I'm going to save this. File, save as, and I'll call it Tiger versus Eagle. And I'm going to save this in that folder I have prepared. Okay, so that's our After Effects project. Now we're ready to put our first little scene or vignette or our composition in here. There's a couple of ways you can do that. I'm in my project panel. Down here in this open gray area, I can right click and say New Composition, or I can come up here to Composition, New Composition, either way. And I'm going to call this Tiger versus Eagle. You can also just leave it as Composition 1, whatever you want to call it. And for this one, there's several different choices, whether it's high definition television or film. I'm going to do it for high definition video at 25 frames per second. And it's about the same size as an image I have resized for 1440 by 1080. I'll leave the pixel aspect. Actually, I'll do the aspect ratio as square pixels. Frame rate 25. Resolution, I'm going to say full. Duration, well, we're just going to do 6 seconds for this. So 0 hours, 0 minutes, 0.6 seconds, and then keep the zeros on the frames. Background is your choice, white, black, whatever. I'm going to keep it with the black background. And I'm going to say OK. There we are, we're ready. Now I want to import my layers, my Photoshop layers. I could go to File, Import, or I could double click on this gray area here. And it should go right to my folder where I saved my file, and there is my Tiger versus Eagle PSD. And I want to make sure I import this as composition, retain layer sizes. I could say Photoshop sequence, whichever. I can say retain layer sizes, open. Make sure it's editable layer styles. And OK. So it should bring in this folder. If I open the folder, there's my 3 layers. I can click on the top one, hold the Shift key down, click on the bottom one, let go, click on any of those and drag them right down here. into my layers and timeline. I could drag them all at once like I just did, or I could drag them in one at a time, whichever. Looks like it's putting them in the reverse order. So I'm going to grab my background and drag it to the background. I want my eagle on top and then my tiger. And now I'm going to reposition these things. I know I'm going to need my background a little bit bigger because we're going to put a camera in here and zoom in on that. So let me make that background bigger. Quite a bit bigger than the frame. We may have to adjust it later, but I'll get it generally where I want it. That eagle, bring him up here in the corner, roughly to the starting point. And for the starting of the video, or animation, I'm going to bring that tiger down here. And I think they're the right size, pretty much the right size. And next thing I'm going to do is get the, right now they're just two-dimensional, in the two-dimensional space. Now I'm going to activate the three-dimensional qualities to make these three-dimensional layers. So now they're in a virtual three-dimensional space, and I can reposition them. Even though they're still flat elements, I can reposition them into a space, into a virtual space, and introduce a camera. Okay. Before I go any further, I'm going to save this. And next, I'm going to introduce my camera. I'm going to click on this top layer here. There's a couple ways I could do it. I could go Layer, New, Camera, or down here in my Timeline or Layers panel, I can right-click, New, Camera. I give the camera a different name if I want to. I think camera 1 is fine. I'm going to leave the presets at 55 or 50 millimeters. Film size 36. I think these will work pretty good for what we're doing, so I'm going to say OK. And now I have my camera in there and my 3 layers. It hasn't really changed my view out here, but let me show you how we can start to change some things. Right now, I'm looking at my view, and I can look closer if I want. Over here, I can look at 50%, 100%, whatever. I'm just zoomed out to 25%. So I can see the whole area. Right now, we're looking one view from the active camera, so that's right in front. If I click that drop down, I have a couple other choices. I could look at this space from the top. Okay, could be a little confusing, but there's my camera that I inserted in here, and it's looking at my space. Now if I click on my background layer over here, that's like I'm looking at the top of that flat background layer, and I could grab this blue arrow and drag that back further into space. I'm going to zoom out a little so I can push him back further into that virtual space. Now you can see this is the camera view here, these little red lines here. I could follow those out, and I can see that it's going to be a little bit smaller once I get to the front view again. Then we can adjust the size. Alright, let me click on my tiger layer, and I'm going to push that guy back a little bit further by clicking on that blue arrow, moving him back into space. And there's my eagle, and I could move him or her, whatever it is, a little closer. And click that tiger again. I can also click it out here, move him a little closer. Now if I want to, I could also click out here on the background. I think I can push it a little bit further back. Good. This just gives us a little more space. We can zoom the camera in there and move our objects around. There's also right and left views. From the left view, here's my camera. Here's my eagle, my tiger, and once again the background. And there's also the right view, bottom view, front, and active camera. There we are. So now my active camera view, I can see, since I pushed that background layer back in this virtual space, it appears a little smaller, so I'm going to make that a little bit larger. It's still in the background space. I just made it a bigger image now. And I'm going to reposition this eagle, bring him in a little bit, and reposition this tiger. I'm going to bring him off screen a little bit, and then I'll bring him on screen in a simple animation. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is some very basic animations. I'm going to do a very straightforward animation with my tiger and then my eagle. So I'm on my tiger layer. Now if I drop down, if I click on this triangle, open up that tiger layer, there's all my basic material options and my transform options. I'm going to open up that transform, and I can see all my different ways to transform this tiger. And I may or may not use a certain one of these, but I can. I'm going to make sure I'm on my layer 1, I mean my frame 1 of my timeline. I'm going to activate all of these. Okay, so it gives me a keyframe here. So there's my first position for this short animation. We have a 6-second video. I'm going to bring my marker almost to the 6-second mark. Pretty close to the end there. And then I can reposition my tiger. And as I reposition my tiger in this very simple animation, you can see how the position changes over here. So if I scroll through here, I can see there's just a very slight motion. That's what I want. Well, I'm going back to frame 1. I'm going to reposition that tiger a little further off screen. There we go. So it gives it a little more of a motion there. What else could I do? Well, let me go back to the end here. This frame with my keyframes at the end. I could also change the scale. I could change the size of my tiger. So I can bring him closer, make him bigger. So now it animates position and size a little bit. I can also animate some rotation. If I wanted to rotate that guy just a little bit. Every little bit of motion can add to the realness of this. Okay. So pretty cool. There's a couple other ones that I could rotate and space this way or this way. Let's give them a little more of a motion. And you could experiment with some of these other motions, but I think that's enough. We did the position and some of the rotations. And let me scroll back to the beginning. So those are just the simple introductory motions we're going to do. Now let me do the eagle. Do the same type of thing. And let me minimize my tiger. Go to the eagle layer. Open up the eagle layer. Open up the transform. I'm on frame 1. And I think I'm going to make the start off this eagle a little bit smaller. I can hold the shift key to maintain proportion. There we go. Now I'm on frame 1. I'm going to activate all these keyframes for all these animations. So I'm frame 1. And now I'm going to scroll towards the end, almost to frame 6. And then when I do any of these, change any of the positions or rotations or anything, it'll make a new keyframe on this side. So first let me move that eagle in towards the tiger. Double check how that's going to look. Alright, so we got some motion there. Maybe a little bit more. And I'm going to change the Z rotation a little bit so the eagle's coming in for a landing on that tiger. Could change some of the Y rotation, sort of tilting him towards us. Maybe the other direction. Sort of like this way. There we go. And the X rotation. Could change the scale also. Make them a little bit bigger. I already changed the position. So you can see how I'm changing things out here, and I can also change things out here on the screen. Alright, so let me preview those changes. So we already have a pretty interesting animation coming in here. Looks like they're about to strike. Let's scroll it back to frame 1. And let me close that eagle layer. We could also animate the background. I don't really need to for this one. So that's our simple animation. We'll come back in a little bit and do some more detailed puppet transformations. But first let me do some camera angle animations. So I'm going to open my camera layer, transform. Once again, I'm on frame 1. And I'm going to bring that camera, remember, if I look from the top, I have this camera here. What I can do is bring that guy in, zoom that guy in. Alright, let me go back to the active camera view, scroll in a little bit so you can see. Once again, I'm on frame 1. I'm going to activate all these, whether I will use them or not. They'll at least be ready. And I have these keyframes here. I'm going to scroll towards the end and do one fluid animation. We could put several within here, but we're just going to do that one fluid one. So I'm at the end there. And I'm going to zoom in by adjusting the position here. I can zoom way into my image. About right there. Let me test that out. Pretty cool. So it feels like we're getting closer. Zooming in. I can also do some of the rotations here. If I go back towards that last frame. I can also rotate the camera view. Test a couple to see what it looks like. I could rotate it that way. It might be nice. Rotate it this way. Right and left. And X rotation. Top and bottom. I like that effect there. And let me zoom out a little bit. I think I zoomed in a little too much. I want a little more of that eagle on there. There we go. So now we got a lot of action with just some simple animation on the animals and zooming in with the camera. Now we can do puppet transformations. Actually, I think I zoomed in a little too much. Let me go back here on that camera and zoom out a little bit because I still want to see that eagle. A little bit of the eagle's wings. Okay, so on that last frame, I'm going to have to reposition my tiger. Hit the space bar to check out the animation. Or just manually scroll through this. I think that looks pretty good. So we've got a lot of motion, a lot of action going on. Make sure I save this. And next, I'm going to add some puppet transformations using the pin tool. Okay, so let me close that camera and let me animate the tiger first. So I have the tiger selected. I'm on that first frame. And come up here to the puppet pin tool. And I sort of want to guess what's going to move. I can pin at areas I want to move and also at some natural joints, whether it's at the neck or the jaw, maybe the ear, shoulder, leg, whatever. and maybe the forehead. So I'm on the first frame, and I put some pins I may want to adjust. I may have to change them later, but I think those might work. Now I'm going to scroll once again back to that, almost to the end. Now I can come back here and reposition these puppet tools, or these pins. Actually, let me go back to the beginning again with this tiger. I think I'm going to start with his mouth closed. So at the beginning I can reposition this creature. Try to make it as natural as possible. I may have to I'll put a few more pins on here to keep it looking natural. So we can make his mouth a little more closed. There we go. Bring his ear up a little, and then we'll bring it back when he opens his mouth. There we go. Okay, so that's at the first frame. I'm going to go towards the last frame and reposition that tiger. I have too many pins, so I'm going to maybe adjust them. I should be able to click on a pin and delete it if there's too many on there. There we go. There we go. I want to look natural. You can see how it could be easy to get out of control here with these. Okay, I want his ear to go back a little bit. This looks a little bit off here, so let me adjust that. It should be good. I can check it out. Scrolling through, we just want a very subtle motion, not too much. So he's opening his mouth, getting ready to attack that eagle. I think I can open it up a little bit further. I almost hear him roaring. There we go, looks pretty good. Let me come back here to frame 1, close that tiger layer, and we'll click on that eagle layer, and do the same thing. I'm on the pin tool, layer, or frame 1, and pin some of the natural areas where it'll move, like the neck, head, a couple areas on the feet, knees. I don't know if eagles have knees, but we'll pretend. And a couple areas on the wings. Tip of that back wing, shoulder, eagle thumb. I don't know if eagles have thumbs, but maybe they do. and some of these other areas that we can stretch out. There we go. That's on frame 1. Let's move to that frame towards the end of this animation. And then I can start to stretch out his feet a little more, like he's going to pounce. Can move his head down like he's coming in for a landing. Maybe back. I guess maybe down like he's ready for attack. Hunch his shoulders a little bit. Open up his wings a little more. And move his tail down a little bit. I'm not sure how birds land. I guess maybe the tail back. Stretch out that wing a lot more. Let's see how that looks. Click off just so I can see it better. Zoom in so you can see what's going on. There we go. So you can see the wings start to spread out there. And he's really starting to react to that tiger. I think I can do a little bit more on that. Go back to that puppet tool. Grab that eagle. A little more of exaggeration there. Go back to my move tool. I think I'm going to bring him in a little bit more so I can see that effects of that wing more. It's like I bent it a little too much. Go back to the still my eagle puppet tool. It's my eagle puppet mesh deform. There's all my different pins. If I click on deform, I can find them again. And I think this one got off a little bit too much. This one didn't move up enough. There we go. Now I can double check that. Go back to my move tool. Zoom in a little bit. And I think that should be pretty good. There might be some glitches in there. We'll double check that. So I'm back to frame 1. I'm going to click the space bar to play it through once, and then the second time it should be a little smoother. All right. It's going to render the first time through, so it'll be a little jittery, a little slow. There you go. The second time it should be the regular pace. We want this to be feel like slow motion. Get the camera angles changing, the zooming. Get that eagle stretching out. Get that tiger opening his mouth, ready to attack. Wings really stretching out here. His mouth's really stretching. Looks pretty realistic. Looks pretty cool. So we started with some stills. Now we have some nice, effective, three-dimensional animation. Last thing I'm going to do is make sure I have this saved. And then I can come back and render it.